Hello, my name is Connie Boston, and I'm the manager of the Senior Peer Program, which is a program connected with West Yavapai Guidance Clinic. The Senior Peer Program is a prevention program that was designed to reach out to older adults who are dealing with the effects of social isolation. And it's a peer program because we recruit and train and vet volunteers who are age 16 above to reach out and provide companionship to older adults age 16 and above who've asked for our help. It is a program that has some proven effectiveness in reducing the risks, both mentally and physically, associated with social isolation. In doing this prevention, I very much have we older adults on my mind. We bring both great strength and we perhaps have greater challenges as we go through the epidemic called COVID-19. We're learning more and more the importance of emotional resilience. As time moves on with the impact of the epidemic, the changes we're facing can test even the most resilient among us. There are conditions that some of us may suffer that have a greater impact on our ability to deal with our emotions. One is clinical depression, another is clinical anxiety. The signs and symptoms of both these conditions are outlined in greater detail if you download the presentation. But I will say that it's important to understand that if we are clinically in need of treatment and intervention, the techniques I'm going to share with you may be a bit difficult to implement right now, but they can serve in the future as a way of creating more emotional resilience. Alcohol use is also increasing among older adults, as well as the risks associated with misusing prescription drugs. We may minimize the impact of alcohol on our bodies without remembering that our bodies physically are aging and do not process. Our major organs don't process alcohol as efficiently and as well. Overuse of alcohol puts at greater risk for falls, not to mention driving under the influence or any number of other problems that can arise. While we are more vulnerable to health problems, we do have choices. I think one of the great advantages of our age is that we've hopefully accrued some wisdom and experience to better weather the hard times. We have a wisdom of knowing that we can learn to manage and adapt to difficult times and come out on the other side. We can remember that we've been through them before and it always ends. We hopefully have come to know ourselves better and enough to understand how we emotionally react and what we can do to help ourselves towards better well-being. The epidemic has reminded us that we are not in control of things as much as we like to think we are. So one of the good things in talking about emotional resilience is to talk about the things we are in control of, although we may not realize that. We are in control of the attitudes we choose to have. While our emotions are instantaneous, we control how we manage them. How we think has a great deal to do with how we react and our attitudes. And once we have become aware of what those reactions are, we can make choices. One of the things that has been wonderful to observe that during this time, we are witnessing so many acts of kindness and generosity of people who are reaching out and caring for others. We know that kindness, in fact, has an effect on our immune system. Consider this study that was conducted with a group of Harvard University students. 132 students watched a 50-minute video of Mother Teresa carrying out acts of kindness. Prior to watching the video and after watching the video, the students were administered test swabs to collect saliva that contained an immunoglobulin that has a great deal to do with providing immunity to certain viruses, bacteria, and other pathogens that can help fight, particularly things we ingest in our mouth. After watching this 50-minute video, the students definitely experienced an increase in the positive immunoglobulin A. And in fact, tested an hour later, the effects were still raised. This is an important thing to remember, and that is how our mind affects our body. They are not separate. And the power of the mind perhaps is something we don't give enough credit. It was thinking and perhaps feeling connection with Mother Teresa and her acts of kindness that helped people to experience kindness in a way that changed their immune system. If we think about this, it is unfortunately true that we are much more apt to remember and react negatively. For example, most of us are pretty aware of the impact of chronic stress on our health. But how often do we think about the fact that our thinking can in fact have the reverse effect and a very positive effect? So now we're moving into talking about the 7 habits of happiness that are backed by science. Science has now confirmed that with certain practices, we can change the neural pathways of our brain. In fact, it turns out that happiness is a set of skills we can learn through practice. Let me talk a bit about what I mean about happiness. It is not so much the fleeting happiness that we may experience with excitement. It is a sense of deep-seated well-being that helps us look at life on a more positive side. Research has shown that only about 10% of our happiness is due to our external circumstances, which are typically things we can't do much about. But 90% is based on our inner environment, and that is the root of our happiness. 50%, interestingly enough, comes from our genes. We can be hardwired for more negativity or more optimism, but we are not needing to be victims to that. Because a full 40% of our well-being and happiness accounts for our intentional actions that we make every day. Happiness is a choice. So let's begin with daily habit number 1, mindfulness. We hear more and more about mindfulness, and in fact, one of the most popular classes we offer through the Senior Peer Program is on practicing mindfulness. It is based on the ancient practice of focusing on the present with non-judgmental awareness. Intensely focusing on something beautiful in nature helps us to keep running thoughts at bay, but to focus on something that gives us a sense of beauty and pleasure. If we become very focused on understanding our reactions and who we are, and if we can do that without judging ourselves, we are in a much better position to become aware and then maybe make different choices that are better for us. Mindfulness has been shown by research to help effectively manage painful thoughts and feelings. Some of the different kinds of mindfulness practices are meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Daily habit number 2 is about practicing gratitude. A regular gratitude practice has been shown to show that it can change the brain's tendency to cling to negative things in our environment. After 21 days of writing down 3 things you are grateful for, you can increase positive thinking and a sense of well-being. It's important to write them down because that's been shown to help create the habit and imprint it in our brains. It's also important when you consider gratitude that it may take practice for you to learn on the simpler things that bring gratitude. It may be easy for us to be grateful for our families or our jobs or the fact that we have enough food. But think about being grateful to a simple daily event that makes you feel pleasure and joy. The more you do that, the more your awareness will increase. Moving to the daily habit number 3. This won't surprise you. It's exercise, having a balanced diet, and enough sleep. In fact, it may be the most effective happiness booster of all. We know that happier people experience better health, while the reverse is true for people with depression and anxiety. A sense of well-being may make it happier to practice these habits. But I do want to say, many of us struggle with this, and it may be very difficult to be consistently disciplined about diet, about exercise. And we may have many things that interfere with sleep. And of course, this takes some work and commitment. But also be kind to yourself, because if you can make improvement in just one area, you will experience the benefits that we're talking about. So try to start or improve a little on something you're already doing. Daily habit number 4 is about doing good. Remember what I talked about in the Mother Teresa study. We know that giving to others releases endorphins, activating the parts of our brain associated with trust, pleasure, and social connection. Volunteering is certainly one way we can get that effect. We can do good and at the same time even boost our longevity. Doing good is something we probably do more than we're even aware of. I've heard so many stories of neighbors these days looking out for their older neighbors, checking in on them, making sure they're okay. And I think that is something that tells us that we are all capable of great acts of kindness and helping other people feel better. Daily habit number 5 is being vulnerable and open. Now, this may sound scary to some of us. Remember, being vulnerable does not mean being weak or passive. It means having the courage to be your true and authentic self, as much as you are able. Certainly, this requires building trust. And some of us may have had early experiences or trauma that makes it very difficult for us to be vulnerable and open. However, it is something we can work on, and some can definitely benefit with the help of a therapist. Think of this. If we are open to other people and vulnerable, they are much more likely to react in kind to us. And what happens then is the increase of deeper intimacy and connection to somebody else, something that we all require. Moving on to number 6, talking more about social connection, and certainly that is on our minds a great deal. Many people have said that we kind of wish that instead of using the phrase social distancing, we really should use the phrase physical distancing. Because in fact, in spite of our limitations, we must be diligent in keeping our social connections going. And we have many ways and opportunities to do that, even though we may not be able to be physically close. Keep in mind that happiness is collective. It has a great deal to do with the happiness of others we are deeply connected to. It can boost our mental and physical health, even, as I said earlier, our immunity and our longevity. Happiness, as it turns out, is even contagious. It can even impact the friend of a friend. So think carefully about your social connections. Are they meaningful? Do you have the opportunity to have enough? Do you think you need to increase them? Or do you need to reevaluate some relationships? Because in the same way happiness is contagious, so can negativity be contagious. And finally, the last daily habit. And it's about purpose and meaning in our lives. Whether we're working or volunteering, it's important to do what gives us a sense of purpose and has meaning to us. People thrive in environments where their strengths are emphasized. Whether we're meeting a challenge of working towards a goal as a team, or having a joyous experience with others who share similar interests, it is true that what we're doing, when it's well suited to our skills, we feel a sense of being in the flow. It is as if it becomes effortless to do our work. And there are the positive chemicals that flood the brain when we're in this place, positive dopamine. And that also activates all the learning centers of our brain. And you may, when thinking back, realize that when you are been in a position where you feel passionate about what you're doing, you become more creative, you learn more, you're sharper in your focus. So making sure we're spending enough time in our lives on what gives us purpose and meaning. It may not be easy sometimes to discover that, but be mindful of the fact that it changes. And we may not just have one sense of purpose or meaning. They can be many. I wanted to let you know, after we finish these 7 habits, that a great deal of the research and information for this presentation has come from the Greater Good Science Center from UCLA at Berkeley. There is a repository there of research on well-being, emotional intelligence, neuroscience. They offer a free newsletter and magazine that you can sign up for online if you'd like to experience learning more about this in depth. And attached to the written presentation is the website to go to. Thank you very much for your listening and your thoughtfulness about this. I wish you greater well-being.